Hi, this is Bobby Blazier, and I have worked with such artists as Michael Martin Murphey, Raul Malo, and Amy Grant, and you are listening to the business side of music.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
This is Bob Bender, and you're listening to this edition of the business side of music. In the studio today, we have Chris Schrienendijk, or as we affectionately call him, Chris D. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
You're an award-winning music producer. From what I read on your bio, you've done 5 albums that won some Juno Awards, which for those that are south of the border, those are Canada's Grammys, along with 7 nominations. You've been nominated for Engineer of the Year. With your extensive industry contacts, you also help artists land record deals, find management, booking agents, and the part we definitely want to talk about, help them license music to TV and film.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get in this business?
Well, it goes way back. I was, in a band and touring around, and basically decided, we had our run. We did pretty well. We were doing all right. And but I was, getting tired of being sort of a broke musician. I needed to make money, and I thought if I was going to continue to make music, I had to, find a way to support myself, and I didn't want to, get a job that was just something that I had to do and then do music. So I thought, I thought it would be great to learn how to record music, because every time I used to go into the studio, it felt like magic to me. It was like, how do they get those sounds? How do they create all this beautiful soundscape? And I had the good fortune of working with some pretty, up there engineers and producers while I was in a band. So I was able to learn a lot about the ins and outs of recording. I never went to recording school. I sort of learned on the job.
So was this like back in the old analog tape days, or was it Pro Tools?
Yeah, there was Pro Tools. Most people were recording on tape still. This is like sort of, mid-90s, late 90s.
Gotcha.
And so when I decided to make the change, I actually went straight to digital because I saw that was going to be the future. And I bought, right when this Pro Tools Digi 001 came out, I went and bought that on my super fast G4 Mac computer, state of the art, right? So basically was, recording a friend's, at that time, my wife, who was my girlfriend then, lived in a cabin up in, I'm originally from Canada, as you mentioned, and we were up near Ottawa in the woods in this little cabin, and I would record people from, just locals and stuff like that, friends for free, and then started making a little bit more money while I was doing that. And then I gradually started making more and more trips to Toronto. So there were, bigger gigs bigger artists I was working with, and one thing led to another. And then I ended up with a job at a place called the Woodshed Studio for a big band in Canada. Probably nobody knows here. They fill stadiums in Canada, and they
what was their name?
Blue Rodeo.
Blue Rodeo.
Yeah, fantastic band. And it was quite a feat for me to, sort of get in with those guys and be able to work with them. So I started working, at their studio and doing a bunch of different things. And then gradually I started branching out, working with more and more artists. Got to work with Chris Christopherson, Bruce Coburn up there, who's pretty big, did some guitar work for Bryan Adams, and was on a Feist record and, other things like that. So won some awards, and then found out that I could get a green card. And we thought, LA was a great place to come, and the industry was really sort of happening down here. And so made the move down here. But while all this was going on, just to touch on this licensing bit that you mentioned, is when I was in the studio, I would have a lot of indie artists that would come in as well as the bigger artists. And it was always frustrating to me to watch them come in, and we would put our blood, sweat, and tears into a record. And the major label artists would come in, and they'd have a manager and an agent and a label and everybody pushing them along. So when I did a record for them, it went off and did stuff.
Right.
Things happened, right? And then the indie artists would come in who were just as talented, a lot of them.
Sometimes more talented.
Sometimes more talented,
Yeah.
Exactly. And they didn't have a chance in heck, really, of trying to get something happening.
And which is sad because, as we found with a lot of these independent artists, they're not handcuffed or constrained by the confines of a label. And this isn't beat up on record label day. We do that plenty of other times.
Right.
But, they have that artistic freedom to come in and do what they want. They just unfortunately don't have the finances.
Right. And if they got the finances, so if they would borrow money from everything from their parents to, just gigging and whatever they were doing or saving up from work or just cutting deals. I mean, a lot of indie artists know that they can lean a little bit on I don't have money, and people who see their talent will help them. Right.
Yeah.
So whatever.
And that still prevails to this day.
I encourage it, definitely. I've definitely worked for a lot less on my card rate on music that I believe in.
I think that's a valid point that I think we all do in this business. If it's something that we're passionate about and we love, we will, for lack of better terms, discount ourselves to help move that situation on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And so when these indie artists would come in, I would think, how are they going to have a career? What are they going to do? And right around that time was when music licensing, so you get your song into TV and film, was starting to become a bit of a thing. Because up until that point, studios and productions would often have their own composers and things in-house. They would, use some of the bigger artists and so on out there. And budgets were basically going down, and they were starting to look at indie artists because they were a fraction of the price. They didn't have to have an in-house composer. They could have a music supervisor, or the person who kind of procures the music and brings it to the
This is what we're looking for this type of project.
Exactly, yeah. So the music supervisor is, just for anybody out there who doesn't know, they're hired by a production to essentially handle finding the music for a show or a movie or an ad, as well as, importantly, clearing it. So they have to make sure that when it gets into the show, some writer somewhere doesn't come out of the woodwork and says, "Oh, I was in the room and I wrote that part and you owe me this," or whatever. So they have to clear it, make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, and then that song ends up in the show. So this was starting to become a thing with indie artists. And I thought, this is a great way for them to make money. So I had a few friends who were, just in the industry who did similar things. So I went to them and I started talking to them and asking them about how the whole thing worked, because I didn't know anything about it. And this is sort of in the early days when it was just starting for indie artists. And I learned a lot about it. And then I figured out some real sort of, secrets or steps that you can take to actually optimize your chance of getting your music into TV and film. So I started helping indie artists. And one of the biggest things right out of the gate, and almost nobody does this, and it's super important, is you need to give music supervisors what they want when they're looking for it. So how are you going to know that, right? So there's a lot of ways to know that. And so these are some of the things on our site. We have a bunch of free content and blogs, and we describe a lot of these things about how to go about that. But you need to target your music to a particular show or a particular music supervisor. And that's really the secret to starting out to get your music at least well placed.
And that's something that we're going to get into after the break. You started a service that selectively licensed music. You had a particular licensing agent at that time?
Well, no. What I was mainly doing is I was taking indie artists and then helping them get their music licensed. So
Gotcha.
I licensed some of it, and then I would also introduce them to people and the indie artists or help them. I didn't want to start like a library. I was a music producer. I didn't have time. I was working 12, 14-hour days in a studio.
And when you talk about a music library, I mean, that can get very large very quickly.
Yeah, that's a whole kind of different ball of wax. Yeah, I'm using that word.
And that in itself is time consuming.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm using that word interchangeably there. So, so basically, and it was to figure out how we could get their music into TV and film so they could make some of those sync fees, because you get a fee up front right away.
Right.
It could be as low nowadays, as low as like $500, but it can be all the way up to like maybe $70,000 for an indie artist. We placed one fairly recently for $30,000. So that's, these are ways you get 3-4 placements a year, you're making six figures, right? If you can get that. So there are ways to go about it, and there are ways not to go about it.
So when we come back, let's touch base on that and dig a little more into your services and your website. I want to talk about that. This is Bob Bender, and we're in the studio today with Chris D. He's here to talk about getting your music into TV and film and making some money, which is a nice opportunity out there. You're listening to this edition of The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Do you start your week listening to The Business Side of Music? Well, I do. This is George from South Africa, and I tell you what, these guys really know what they are talking about.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
This is Bob Bender, and we're back in the studio here with our guest, Chris D., talking about how an artist can make money these days. We know that the record deals aren't what they used to be, if they're even out there anymore. And even in those days, there wasn't a lot of money, especially for the independent artist or the independent songwriter. So you've created something, and I went to your website, makemoneyfromyourmusic.com, and you seem to be providing some great opportunities here for these artists and these songwriters.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what that is it's an extension of what I was doing already in the studio. So, long story short, when I was working in the studio and I came down to LA, what happened was I started looking around for work down here in LA, and right about that time, my wife and I got pregnant. And I was thinking, I really didn't want to be doing the 12, 14-hour days in the studio and have a young daughter at home who, I wanted to be around, and sort of be there to watch her grow up and spend more time. So,
and that's a rarity in itself that you get to spend time with your kids as they grow up.
Absolutely.
Especially in our business.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was thinking, what can I think of? How can I make this happen? So I actually started an online recording studio. So I actually also record people online.
Was that Sundown Session Studio?
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
So Sundown Session Studio.
So how does that work?
Well, basically, it's when I was thinking about how songs are made, in terms of pop. Now, you can't record things like jazz bands, right, or blues bands. I mean, they have to play off each other. There's always going to be a place for a brick and mortar studio. There's always going to be a place have a space where a band can go into and do it right. It's also not the best formula for, say, an really established indie artist who knows everybody in their local town, can cut amazing deals with studios and session players or whatever. This is really for people who live in places where they have no access to top studios, they have no access to top session players, they can't get good producers, and even if they could, they can get it a lot less at Sundown Session Studio because we don't have overhead. Okay. There's no actual studio. So I have a whole team, a roster of world-class session players, award-winning engineers, so it's a world-class, top-notch product. So you can record with us and it can go straight on the radio and stand up to anything.
So how does this work? If I'm an aspiring songwriter, I've written a song, or I'm an aspiring artist, how do I approach this?
Right. So let's say you live in Michigan or something, and you're like in a small town up there, and there's not a lot going on in terms of studio.
Because there's 6 feet of snow on the ground.
Right. Yeah. Maybe you can't get out of the house.
Can't get out of the house.
At least this week, right? Crazy up there. So what you do is you would contact me through our website, and you would send me a demo. Could be on your guitar or your piano or whatever you do. You can even sing into your smartphone, and you just send it, hey Chris, I got this song. This is kind of what I want to do with it. And then you and I would get on the phone together, and we talk about like what's your vision for it? How were you inspired to write it? What are some of the artists that you sort of seeing it being in the same playlist as? What sort of genre of music are you going after? And we narrow all these things down, and then I spend a little bit of time with it, and then I come back and say, okay, here's my ideas, Bob. This is what I think we should do. And I kind of go through it in terms of the instrumentation, the arrangement. Do you want to sing it? If you don't want to sing it, we have lots of amazing session singers who are incredible. And we figure all that out. and then we literally start building the track step by step. So you get to hear your track that you sent me, the scratch track is what we call it.
Right.
You get the scratch track, and then we'll put, whatever's happening. Maybe it's drums, maybe it's beats underneath it to start. You get a copy of that, and then you okay it. You say, okay, I like that. Can you change this part? So you get a free tweak. And
so you're very hands-on in there,
Absolutely.
Even though you're not sitting in the studio.
Absolutely, yeah. And then so you would send your comments, and then we would make a change, and then you'd say, great, those sound awesome. The drums sound great. So you'd take off, sign off on it. And then we would move on to the bass or synth bass, whatever style of music it is, and we'd build the track just like that all the way to the vocals.
Right.
And if you were going to sing it, then we would send you a stereo mix, and then you would sing it in your home studio. If you're not very good at it, I would give you tips. Here's a cool mic you should buy that are totally affordable. Here's how you should record yourself.
Hang some acoustic wall treatments, or at the very least moving blankets, something like that, just to deaden up the space.
Yeah, more than blankets, but yes,
Yeah.
you got the idea.
Yeah.
So I would basically give you a basic idea on how to kind of do it, and to get a good meat and potatoes solid sound for us,
Right.
and how to get a performance, and then you would send us those tracks, and then that would go off to our mix engineer and then mastering engineer.
When they cut their own vocals, is that more of a challenge for you sometimes, or?
It depends.
Yeah.
I'm very frank as a producer. If I don't think they're cutting it in terms of what they're trying to do, okay? So I have this saying, the music always has to win. And I'm very careful about that with people who I know that are, have a lot invested emotionally in what they're doing. But ultimately, I'm trying to make the music win, because if the music wins, everybody wins.
And we've talked about that on other podcasts with other producers. The producer's role is many things. The producer wears many hats, and one of those is to be the cheerleader. But I like what you said. It's that certain amount of frankness that you have to give, honesty that you have to give the artist, because, once it's out there, it's out there. You can't go back and fix it.
Yeah.
Especially if it winds up on YouTube or, any of those other platforms. So absolutely.
Well, we've, I'm not an ogre or anything like that. I'm pretty tactful when it comes to that. But if we were having a problem with a vocal or something, I would try my absolute best to make it as good as it could.
Right.
And if it really wasn't cutting it, and this particular artist said, I really want to submit it to the song contest, or I want to do this, or I want to I want to get a publishing deal with it, then I would just be like, maybe we should check out some of our singers, and see what that.
You brought up a very valid point. A few months ago, I was a judge on an online songwriting contest out of South Africa.
Oh.
And we listened to hundreds and hundreds of demos, and we had to score them, 1 through 10 or 1 through 5, whatever that number was. And, some of them I couldn't even score because just vocally, and I'm not talking about the quality of the recording, but just this is someone that, maybe it was a great song, but could not get through their rendition of it,
Right.
because somebody such as yourself should have been overseeing, hey, you have a great concept, you're telling an amazing story, but we really need someone else to sing this.
Yeah.
And I think talking to the other judges on this panel, in fact, we all pretty much concurred that was detrimental to them. Right. And it says something, if you're going to spend the time to write the song, spend the time to record it and spend some money to do it correct.
Yeah. And, ultimately, my goal at Sundown Sessions Studio is to make sure that the song has a good chance of success. We're not like an online studio. There's lots of options out there.
Right.
There's sites you can hire session players at and so on. But my goal is to take the same stuff I was doing when, albums I worked on won awards, and apply that same professionalism and same level of quality to what they're doing. And so far, it's been working out great. I mean, just this year alone, I co-produced and then produced, respectively, the number 1 and 2 winner in the Broad Jam International Song Competition. I also produced the song that won the UK song competition in the electronic category. We have a guy from Ireland who won a national radio contest and got heavy rotation for a song he wrote. We've got another guy who got a big publishing deal. That's what I want. I want those indie artists to be able to make help them make a living at what they're doing, but find success with those songs.
And so when we come back, I want to talk about the one thing we haven't touched on yet really is getting that music not only on radio, whether it's terrestrial or it's satellite or it's, the new platforms, Spotify and Pandora, et cetera, but also getting it into film and television. Because, here in the studio that we're in LA, that's really a lot of the function is, they focus on creating content especially for television, online-based television. So I think it's an untapped resource that a lot of independent artists don't look at when they get the chance. So we'll take a break, and we'll come back, and we'll talk a little bit about that. This is Bob Bender, and you're listening to this edition of The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Hi, this is Vinny Rebus, the founder of Indie Connect. Our goal is to ensure that you have the knowledge, the tools, skills, resources, and connections that you need to develop a profitable and long-lasting career in music. One way we do this is through these Business Side of Music podcasts. I'd also like to invite you to check out Indie Connect magazine, our free multimedia online publication packed with practical interviews and advice from music industry experts. Go to www.indieconnectmag. That's www.indieconnectmag.com. Let us walk with you and guide you every step of your musical journey.
Next up, the Indie Artist Spotlight, brought to you by Reverb Nation.
Hi, this is Anna Tamburella, and I'm a member of Reverb Nation.
Laugh until we cry, and cry until we laugh, and doing stupid things that we all wish we could take back, like climbing water towers so we could see the stars, but jumping off the ladder 'cause we're scared up this far, and driving around in circles on the same four streets, music up so loud so we can't hear ourselves sing. Oh, 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 oh.
I'm based out of Birmingham, Alabama, but I'm currently a freshman studying music at Auburn University.
Get where we're going, we forgot to put on the brakes.
My music is considered singer-songwriter.
It's like I blink twice, turn around and all of a sudden it's me. We were just underneath those Friday night lights, saying how we wish these nights could last. So how did we get here so fast?
I've performed at CMA Fest, opened for Bobby Tomberlin, Confederate Railroad, played Workplay in Birmingham, and several venues around Nashville.
You can't be late for curfew, but you're up late on the phone, and you don't want to hang up 'cause you got too much to say, and you're hoping that you'll always feel this way. Oh, 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 oh.
Some of the artists I love listening to and have influenced me are Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit and Fleetwood Mac.
Where we're going, we forgot to put on the brakes. It's like I blink twice, turn around and all of a sudden it's me.
This is a cut from the EP I'm currently working on, titled So Fast.
We were just underneath those Friday night lights, saying how we wish these nights could last. So how did we get here so fast?
You can find me on Facebook and YouTube under Anna Tamburella Music.
How did we get here so fast?
is Anna Tamburello, and I'm a member of Reverb Nation.
You're listening to the business side of music.
This is Bob Bender. You're listening to this edition of the business side of music. And in the studio today is our guest record producer, Chris D. During the breaks, we talk about some things and get to know each other's stories a little bit more. You know, I love the idea that you love working with independent artists because that's really kind of my passion these days too. My wife Debbie and I chatted with you before we went on the air in regards to, you know, helping the independent artists. And, you know, we created a TV show to do just that, to show the independent songwriters who, from my aspect, seem to be a lot under the radar these days. And so anything we can do to get it out there. You talked a little bit about recording studios and how they still have a place. You know, we discussed a couple episodes ago with a producer that, you know, the brick and mortar studio is still there. It's just different now. You wanted to touch on something that we were talking about before we went to the break. And so let's talk about that, because I do want to discuss music and television and film, because I think that's a growing, burgeoning type market that's a very, I think it's tapped, but I don't think it's been tapped into enough yet.
Right. So actually the thing that I was wanting to touch on was about TV and film. And so I did this experiment one time. We have a mailing list, and we also have a small library that we shop. Like we don't ask people to send us material.
So when you say small library,
I mean small. I mean we have probably 30 artists.
Okay,
and we select specific songs from them. And if
it's a nice tight boutique,
super tight, yeah. And it's not our main business, but we have a lot of connections,
right?
And so if we see an easy opportunity, we submit for it,
sure,
because it's an easy thing to do.
In that mindset, you also have to know what's in that library and what those artists have to be able to provide.
Well, I do.
Yeah, I was going to say you do.
Yeah,
and that's a lot on your plate just there.
Well, that's why it's small.
Yeah.
I again, like I said before, I don't have time to be running a big library and all of that sort of thing. So,
because I know when I get on my computer and I start going through music that artists have sent me or songwriters have sent me, I'll discover something from 5, 6, 7 years ago. And, oh my gosh, I wonder whatever happened to that.
Right.
And it's great music.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, essentially, the whole idea is that if we can shop things here and there to certain opportunities, fantastic. But the main push is to teach songwriters how to do it on their own.
Right.
And it's not rocket science, but like 95, maybe 98% of them are doing it wrong. They're doing it with a shotgun approach. They record a song, then they basically upload it to SoundCloud, then they find some free libraries that they can put their song on, thinking someone's going to find it.
Right.
They stick it up there, and then they just hope.
Along with the hundreds of thousands of other songs.
Yeah. There's no way. I mean, once in a while, someone might discover your song, but you have to, basically, it's just like a football game. You got to take the ball and you got to put it in the end zone yourself.
Yeah.
So you've got to carry it all the way through and figure out, strategize how you're going to do that. So we teach them essentially how to do that. But the quality thing you were talking about, which is a great thing to actually talk about now, is, and I talked about targeting. You've got to give them what they want when they want it. And the other super important thing that's really critical and so often overlooked, as you know, in that song contest, is everything that gets into TV and film has to sound as good as everything else that's getting into TV and film. So if a songwriter has a song that they recorded in their home studio and they're not a pro, what I always advise before they even think about doing anything at all is take something from their genre that's a popular song that sounds pro.
Right.
Take a few, put yours up next to it and A/B it, and then in your heart of hearts, ask yourself, does that sound as good? Now, it doesn't have to be 99% of the way there. It can be 90, but it's got to be in the same, it's got to stand up to the rest.
And don't rely on mom and dad or Aunt Ethel or whoever. You really have to be the devil's advocate when you're doing that, because it's getting more competitive every single day. In fact, Steve here in the production studio was telling us, now we were discussing content for Netflix, and from a video standpoint, Netflix is now not taking anything that isn't 4K.
Oh, interesting.
To be submitted.
Okay.
And so, audio-wise, although you and I, in the music end of things, the audio end of things, over the years we've compressed the music, and I've talked about this many times. We get down to where the music fits inside of earbuds instead of some really wonderful dynamic warm speakers.
Right.
So when you judge your music, judge it with all the dynamics in place.
Correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Because you don't know where it's going to wind up. It might wind up in a THX Dolby film soundtrack,
That's true.
Yeah.
Now that's the easy part though, right?
Right.
Is that technical part? That's pretty easy. Just make sure you record it at 24-bit, 48 kilohertz is the sort of the native broadcast sample rate. Though that doesn't matter.
And anybody that's worked in a studio knows what that means.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the easy part. The hard part is recording it well, having the experience to record it so it sounds good, right? And that is so important. And that's another reason that I set up the studio was to give people that professional angle if they want to do it. Now, for those out there who record in their home studio, and there's tons of great records that come out of bedrooms. I mean, this isn't a blanket statement at all. It's just that a lot of people, like you said, they listen to their family or something who says, oh, we love everything you do. And then they try to do something with that. And that's not really happening, So it's really important.
Yeah. And you're competing with, thousands upon thousands of other artists in the same genre, same style. And if you think it's good enough, what you said, be it with other artists out there, especially established artists and songwriters, know what you're up against. This is a conversation we have with musicians in regards to moving to Los Angeles or Nashville or Austin or New York. Those become very deep pools of talent. And if you're not on your A game from day one, you'll just get chewed up and spit out and, sent back home licking your wounds.
Right.
And I think it's the same thing when it comes to the studio. You need to understand what it takes to get in there and do it right.
Yeah.
And do it right.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you're absolutely right that sync and licensing music is highly competitive. So how are you going to compete against all of these people? A lot of people think it's kind of like a lottery, right? They think, it's just so many people out there, and how do you compete?
Right place, right time. And,
or whatever. And the thing is that there are indie artists who get sync after sync after sync, right? And there's a bunch that don't. Way, 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 way more that don't.
Right.
Okay. So what is it about those indie artists that are getting synced all the time? So I mentioned targeting. So they're getting the right music to the supervisor at the right time. They have high quality music. So they're already developing a reputation, right? Because whenever they submit something, even if it doesn't get selected, so if I was a music supervisor and you submitted something to me, and I'm like, man, Bob submitted 3 things to me. It's like he got a hold of me, and I listened to his music. Every single one of those was an absolute contender, but it wasn't, got beat out by something.
Right.
I'm going to call you next time I have something like that's in your genre. I'm going to be like, Bob's on it. He does his homework. Now, so that's all fine, right? But how do you get your foot in the door, really get it in the door? So one thing that we do is we offer people the chance to pitch their music live to our panel of music supervisors.
Really?
That's what we do. And that is critical, because when you can introduce yourself and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, even if you're in a class of like 30 people, if you can say, hey, I'm so-and-so, here's my music. I've showed them how to target it, how to do everything right. I've overseen the production, whether I did it or they did it, and vetting the music, which is another thing we do. And you touched on that. Absolutely. About family. Yeah. So I teach them how to form a listening group to vet the music, figure out what the strong points of the music are, and remix it if possible, if need be. And then we pitch it live to music supervisors. So then you introduce yourself, you give them the music, and not only does that help you, maybe they pick it right away. If they don't, you can always write them back, say, hey, I met you through so-and-so and did this. They're going to answer your email probably.
Yeah.
And not only that, when you make a cold call, you can say, hey, I submitted this to so-and-so and they loved the song. It wasn't quite the right fit, but I know you're working on something similar. You want to check it out. Well, that's your foot's in the door. That's how you beat 99% of the people out there who aren't doing it right.
Somebody comes to you and says, we're doing this particular show, we're looking for this type of music. Does that thing happen? I mean, where a songwriter's got to get out there and write something just to fit that
Yeah. So music supervisors will send us what are called briefs, and they're basically a synopsis of what they're working on. Sometimes they won't tell you what it is. They're legally bound by not telling you. It's like, we're working on a movie and it's got a scene like this. Sometimes you'll even get a scene. They'll send you a scene, right? And then you can actually put the music under it.
So you're almost at that point becoming a composer to a certain extent.
You're becoming a music supervisor in a way,
okay.
because the composer would write a cue to the part, right? Compose that. But you're trying to basically figure out what the best fit is for the scene that the music supervisor is going to say, wow, that's a slam dunk, right? So as a musician, when you're starting out, the internet is magical. There's great ways to figure that out. And one of them is to go to a website called tunefind.com. So that's TUNE find, FIND.com. And you can see all the shows that are listed there and what music was in those shows. And you can go through there and see what patterns that a particular show has or a music supervisor likes.
Right.
You listen for different characteristics, right? You listen to, are they using really upbeat songs? What are there mainly male or female vocalists? Or is it just composer music? Or is it, what is the music? Where do you fit? And if you were going to write a song like that, how would you write it? Or you're already an artist and you already have music like that. So you find the show.
You have it in your own library that you think might fit.
You got it on your CD, right? Because you're an artist and you've got your CDs and you're like, oh, I just cut a record and that's my sound. I could totally fit into this show.
Right.
You target that show. So that's how you start to learn how to target these things. And you can go to imdb.com, check out who the music supervisor was. And that's one of the basic things that we teach in how to target.
And that's such an important thing too, is doing your homework, knowing what it is that you're getting into.
Exactly.
Because a lot of times someone will come up and say, hey, I've got a great song, and take a listen to it, and you'll go, that was perfect 5 years ago, but it doesn't fit what we're trying to do today. So do your homework, know what it is that you're getting into.
Yeah. And another good exercise is to literally take, you can go on YouTube, take a scene from a show that you're targeting, turn the volume off and play your song underneath it.
Yeah.
See how it fits. Or maybe keep the volume up if it's just dialogue.
You just touched on something that I think about quite a bit. Watch a TV show, put it on closed caption, and turn the volume completely off.
Right.
And watch how the dynamics of that show change.
Right.
Because the music has so much to do with whether it's a romantic moment or it's a thriller moment or a suspenseful moment. That music has something to do with that.
That's right. Yeah. And you have to remember, it's really important to remember that music supervisors are people just like you and I. Okay. So they have hundreds of people trying to get their attention, sending the music, some of them every day, right? Hundreds every day, some of them, depending on what they're working on. So, but music supervisor is always going to, just like we do, whether a mechanic or a doctor or a dentist or whatever, we try to find the best one, and we generally sort of stick to that, right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean that they're not open to new stuff. Like a lot of music supervisors I know, some who are right at the top, like they're the heads music supervisors of some of the big studios here in LA. Mm-hmm. They love indie music and they love supporting bands. Because they grew up with music, right? So when they can, they love it. And I know one guy in particular, and I can't say who it is because I wasn't even allowed to interview him, but he's the head of a big studio here in town. And he went up and he went to New Brunswick, Canada, which is like way out of the way. That's like, you're in the middle of nowhere. And you're north and like way east. Yeah. And he basically, it's a beautiful place and stuff, but is not a musical center. And that's my point. It's not a musical, cultural center in general. There's great local bands. He went to a small music festival there just because, and saw a band there he loved, and he got them into a big TV show because he loved them. There's lots of people like that out there. So it's important to remember that you need to be that go-to person. You need to develop that relationship over time. And by following sort of the steps that, I show people how to do, you end up coming out with the knowledge and the actual goods to make that happen.
You said something that is, I think, the key word, and that's relationships. And it's developing those relationships with those people and keeping them.
Right. And that's by solving a problem for them.
Yeah. So if someone wants to reach out to you, take this to the next level, how do they find you?
Yeah, so we've got tons of free vlogs. I'm weekly. I'm sending stuff out to my mailing list. And they're all posted on our website at makemoneyfromyourmusic.com. makemoneyfromyourmusic.com. And, people can go there and listen to all the freebie stuff that's on there. And then every once in a while we release a course, pretty sporadically.
Right.
And stuff like that. So,
And these are online courses that they can take?
Yeah, but they're sort of I get pretty involved. I do weekly coaching calls with people,
Gotcha.
and we do it
so it's very hands-on.
Oh yeah. We do it as a team. I don't want it to be this kind of course like, here's a course, yeah, thanks, bye, good luck.
Right.
I want I literally get a class, and then I'm in with them, and then I'm with them the whole way.
Almost is it like a webinar type thing? Or?
There's a course. It's full of modules.
Okay.
And people learn all the stuff in the modules, and then every week I have a coaching call. So I get on, and everyone asks me a bunch of questions, so like a little campfire.
Oh, okay, cool.
And I actually try to keep the class limited. I don't want. You can't relate to 200 people, right?
No, and I've been on those, and they don't work because there's 4 or 5 people that have basically overtaken the class.
Yeah. That's no fun. So I like to look at it as a little campfire where everybody can come, be safe, and share and ask any question they want. And then we go through the modules so they're spread out. So each coaching call has to do with the last module. So each person is basically writing a song the way they're supposed. There's a bunch of rules in how to write songs with universal lyrics and all that for licensing. We don't have time to get into that. But there's all these things you have to know about writing, and then production, and then vetting, and then targeting, and then deal points, and then pitching. So then that's when we pitch to our panel of music supervisors in the course. So that whole process is highly hands-on, and the idea is to succeed, right? The whole idea is to get success, because ultimately their success is my success. I mean, if I can't, get people's music into TV and film, I've got no business teaching it.
Right.
I've had success with it in the past, and I have success with it now, and I want to have even more success with it in the future.
Well, the business model has changed so much. We've talked about this on other episodes too, about, that the radio business has changed, the record business has changed, film and television is changing. Television especially is changing with these new platforms like Hulu and Netflix and Amazon Prime, and they're all looking for content all the time.
Oh, and there's hundreds of channels out there, on cable, and then every country. Think of every country, right? And then multiply that, and then all the online stuff, then all the ads. I mean, the video games. I mean, it's a voracious appetite for new music.
It is,
and the reason that they want new music is because they want to feel like they're cutting edge. They want the latest and the coolest and the greatest. Or if it's a period piece, they don't want to reuse something. Sometimes that'll happen if it's a popular song, but they don't want to. That's why indie artists, it's such a great time to be licensing as an indie artist right now.
And I noticed that a few years ago, I was watching Christmas movies during the holidays, and you would hear the same song in film after film and after film. And you're going, is there no originality? So yes, there is. It's just getting that music into the supervisor's hands so it can be used and make money for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Chris, thanks for being on the show. Always a pleasure to have great guests, and you're definitely right there. So thank you. We'd love to have you back on sometime.
That would be great, Bob.
Good.
Thanks so much.
All right. If you're interested in learning more about our show, drop us a line at musicpodcast@mail.com. That's musicpodcast@mail.com. If you have any suggestions of persons or topics that involve the music industry you'd like to hear about on our podcast, please feel free to let us know. You can follow us on Facebook on the Business Side of Music podcast page. You can also find us on Twitter at Music Business Podcast. Also, if you're listening to this podcast through iTunes, post a review on what you think of our show. This is Bob Bender, and you've been listening to this edition of The Business Side of Music.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender for Bob Bender Productions. Co-producer for the show is Vinny Rivas. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Los Angeles, California and Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound designed by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.